Welcome to my session. So this session is how to measure well-being and productivity using Viva Insights. So first up, M365 Chicago is always a great place to present, but they always do a great charity event as well. So please do donate. Children First Fund. I think we did a great service to them last year. So please do donate to that. And as always, these events can't take place without sponsors. We always need sponsors. So please do go to the channels that are set up for all of the sponsors. Have a chat with them. And I believe that there are prizes and giveaways as well. So if you speak to the sponsors, get the secret word, and then you're in with a chance of actually winning as well. You can get to the sponsors through the channels, so please just check out the channels and go and have a chat to them. Please also provide feedback. So conferences like this, we always want to know whether we're doing well, whether we're doing bad, and that goes for the organisers and the speakers. So please do provide feedback as well. So a little bit about me. So my name's Alan Eardley. You might be able to tell from the accent. I'm based in the UK. So I actually work for Microsoft in the Microsoft Technology Centre in the UK. Along with that, I also run the Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance User Group. I'm the Hat of the Grey Hat Beard podcast, which is a podcast on modern work. And I also help run the London Power Platform User Group. So let's cut to the problem. What's the session all about? I think it's probably quite obvious that everything has changed over the last 18 months or so. Organizations who weren't thinking about working remotely have been forced to work remotely. And so really what we're experiencing is transformation like we've never experienced it before, mostly because we haven't been able to plan for it and we haven't been able to foresee what the impacts are going to be. So when we look at how this impact has affected us, we can see that 82% of managers expect to have more flexible work from home policies. Those of us who were lucky enough to be working from home before, that was something that, we thought was quite normal, but a lot of people, it wasn't normal at all. So it's really taken them by surprise, and the benefits are really powerful. There's a lot of benefits from working from home, but also there are a lot of disadvantages. So a lot of people are not geared to work from home based on their situation, their personal circumstances. It's no good if you don't have enough space to have a desk and, maybe 17 monitors. But it's also no good if your kids and your family are at home and, you're trying to have calls whilst your partner's having calls as well. So that's a real challenge for a lot of people. And what does that create? That creates a situation where people are maybe trying to fit work in. Maybe they're unable to actually switch off. They're unable to actually separate work because they're not commuting. They're not only working when they're in the office, they're working wherever they are, whether it's the kitchen table, whether it's sat in front of the TV watching something, they're on the phone, they're actually working. And this is creating, it's creating burnout. It's creating a decrease in mental health. So we really need to think about, the impact that these changes have had on individuals, how individuals have maybe benefited, but also the more adverse reactions that we've had to working from home. And we have to think that actually this is going to continue to change. We're not in a position where all of a sudden, we will go back to the way we were. That will never happen. We won't ever end up back where we were, because there are benefits as well as disadvantages. So we really need to think about, what does it mean over the next year, 18 months to actually develop a hybrid way of working, a hybrid situation where we are actually, some of us are in the office, some of us are working from home. What does that actually mean for our organizations? And that might be, office space. It might be how we're managing people. It might be how we're engaging in meetings. How do we have a hybrid meeting where half the audience are in the office and half are not? Making sure that we don't have a two-tier system where there are different benefits for each set of employees, whether they're at home or whether they're actually in the office. And then we still need to think about how we actually work, how we engage with each other, email, meetings, chat, documents, back-to-back meetings isn't good for anybody, whether you're in the office or not. So we really do need to think about how our behaviors actually influence how effective we are at doing our jobs. Now, every organization has people, and that is the key to all of this, is our people. And we need to think of them in different ways. We need to think about how our individual employees contribute to an organization. Me as an individual, I work a number of hours. I engage with other areas of the organization in teams and organizations. So whether that's a department, a directorate, a division, we have to engage. We have to be communicating and collaborating. And then we have external stakeholders as well. How do I engage with my clients? I worked for many years as a consultant. Part of what I do is engaging with clients. When I can't do a face-to-face workshop and put post-it notes up on the wall, what does that mean? How do I still deliver that same service? So we really need to consider how we engage internally within our organization. And when we're thinking about that, we really need to think about, how are our staff? How are they actually doing? Are they being productive? Are they actually getting the job done that, they're employed to do? Are they burning out? Are they maybe spending more hours than they want to spend and more hours than we want them to spend actually being productive to get that job done? If they're burning out, the other question we must ask is, are they well? And that doesn't just mean, how are you doing today? That means, how are you doing today, yesterday, last week, this month, this year? Things mount up, things change, they build up. And that's really what we want to understand is, are they in a long-term position where we can say they are healthy, they are productive, they are not suffering from adverse mental impacts of working from home and not seeing their colleagues. And based on the answers, what we really need to then think about is, how can we help them? How can we, if we identify a challenge, how can we actually start to help them and start to make them feel better, feel more productive, reduce the impact of that burnout? So these are really big challenges. They're not challenges that IT and technology are used to kind of addressing. They're challenges that people tend to address. So we really need to think of it from a people perspective. So the solution that we have it's a mix of technology and people. And one of the key elements is, the Microsoft Graph. We have so much information about how we work, what we do, what our behaviors are, what our technical behaviors are. And that information is really powerful because it means that we can see, when people are collaborating, when they're communicating, when they're in work, actually looking at emails or having team conversations. And we can actually start to use this information. We can use lots of this information to actually give us valuable data around how effective our workforce are and whether they're isolated, are they engaging. All of this information, the insights that we get from all of our interactions, we can actually really get a good insight into all of the behaviors that we have. So all of that data that we get from a Microsoft Graph, we need to turn it into information. We need to actually be able to convert it into something that is going to actually be useful for us as an organization. And this is really where we start to see Viva Insights come in. And the way I look at Viva Insights is it's an umbrella at the moment. It has several different components. And we're going to see more of it coming under that Viva Insights banner. So you will have seen the Viva Insights app, and I'll go through that in a little while. That will be really the core focus of where all of this information is going to start to surface. If you haven't really looked at the Viva Insights app, you may be familiar with some of these other sort of building blocks that we have. So My Analytics, this is really, well, it's in the name, it's My Analytics. It's only to do with me. And it really is trying to give me an insight into what I'm actually doing, how I'm working, what my habits are. It's very personal to me. It's only looking at my data, but it does give me an insight into what I'm doing and how that that might be improved. So it does have hints and tips about how to have more focus time, how to actually manage meetings more effectively, manage my time more effectively. But it's very personal. It's targeted at me. Productivity score is something that's probably less widely used. It's accessible through the admin center in Microsoft 365. And that's really given an organization an insight into how the tools are being used. So whether we are collaborating in teams, whether we're using the communication tools we have available, how we're using meetings. So productivity score is kind of an organizational level score of how we're actually using the technologies that are available to us. The one that's probably the least known is workplace analytics. And this is really where we're looking at saying, if I take all of that data from the graph and I actually start to layer on top other information, what insights can I get into the way my organization works, the behaviors of different areas of my organization? And this is really where some of that information is going to start to pump into Viva Insights. It's going to start to come in and inform managers in terms of how they're working, but we will still retain this workplace analytics insights that we can get through Power BI, we can get through a dedicated portal. And I'll show you what that looks like and how that works, because that's really the key to answering particular questions. So we have these three different elements that we currently have that are contributing to how Viva Insights is going to come together. And there are three ways of analyzing data. The data that we're really looking at, we're looking at behaviors here. So we're really looking at how we manage this information and what we can derive from it. So, the types of information that are accessible to us, we have absolute information. It's going to change incredibly slowly. It's not going to be something that's going to be subjective that we change based on what we're doing. It's part of us. We then have things like role and level. They will change, but essentially we're saying that information is slowly changing. We might have objectives that we might be going for. So what do we know? How do we certify ourselves? How do we do courses? How do we certify that we've actually carried out a particular compliance course, for example? So we have objective information. We then have much more subjective information. What do I do? That's the feedback loop. What does my manager think I'm doing? How is my annual review going, my quarterly reviews? This really provides, my performance, how I'm doing, but it is quite subjective, but it's really valuable information. If I have the 360 feedback and I say, right, well, I'm doing really well, my manager agrees, that's great. That needs to be put in to say, actually, how does that map to our behavioral data? So we need to start thinking about that as well. And then we have surveys and interviews. These have come, certainly in the UK, have come to be known as pulse surveys, those weekly, bi-weekly surveys that people are doing to say, actually, how are we feeling? How are we feeling today, this week, this month? It's really important to understand what our workforce feels. And that way we can actually start to see over time, well, are there differences? Are there different behaviors that are maybe influencing that as well? And then we have Viva Insights and workplace analytics. And this is information, we can change it. Once it's done, it's done. But it is really how I'm working, where I'm working, and it is my behaviors. Now, we can actually combine all of this information and we can bring it together. And we can then start to look at this information and to ask questions of it. And so what we really want to think about is what sort of questions can we ask? So we could say, digital collaboration habits, time spent in meetings. Everybody's been complaining about how many meetings they have. That's great. We know that that's a bad thing. It's anecdotal until we can actually prove it, until we can actually see how much time we're spending. Time spent in meetings. We might be spending more time in meetings than actually we should be, because we may not have enough time remaining to actually carry out our jobs. So these are sort of the really literal things. Okay, I can see the behavior. I have tangible information that I can measure. I can therefore say, we need to change the behaviors We need to spend less time in meetings or have more productive meetings. It's going to save us a lot of time and effort if we change that meeting behavior. Time spent doing emails. How many times are we checking to see whether we have new emails? How long are we doing that? Are we doing it from, the moment the alarm goes off in the morning to the moment our head hits the pillow? That's not necessarily a good thing. So this is really literal information. We can read it based on the face value. I can see that team is spending on average 12 hours a day just looking at email. We can then start to have more comparative information. So if I look at comparative information, really what I'm trying to see is if I have multiple teams who have the same objectives, maybe they're doing the same job, they're both teams of developers, they're both teams of salespeople, they're both teams of PR people. What is their behavior? And can I measure that against some of that sort of HR data? Are their team doing well? Are they hitting their targets? Team A's hitting their targets, Team B's not hitting their targets. Is there difference in the behaviors that we can actually see and say, actually, maybe they do need to change the way they collaborate, the way they engage with external parties or external stakeholders. Maybe they need to change the way they're engaging with their line manager. So this is really where we start to see, if we've got questions, how do we actually answer those questions and answer those questions in a way that gives us behaviors that we can start to change. And at this point, we really need to start thinking about, when we ask these questions, the outcome is going to be an answer that should influence how we change the behaviors in the organization. And then we have contextual information. So, if you have a team of people and you can see that they're all burning out, they're all doing a lot more hours than they should be, then at that point, maybe you need to be looking at hiring justifications. Is that an indication that actually, either their behaviors are bad, but actually it might just mean that they've got an awful lot more work than we thought they did, and we need to increase the size of the team. We might also look at, processes. How is it taking so long to complete a particular process? Are there ways that we can optimize that process? So these are types of information that we can really start to look at based on the information that comes out initially from the graph, but as we look at it through the lens of workplace analytics, this is where we can really start to analyze some of the information. So let's have a deeper look at that information. What information is actually coming out of the graph that we're using here? And this is where we're looking at the information that's going into My Analytics and Workplace Analytics, which will end up in Viva Insights. So in Outlook, we can actually set our working hours. We can do this in the Viva Insights app now, and we can do it in My Analytics. And when we set our working hours, we're essentially putting a start and a stop to when we expect to actually be engaging with our corporate content. That means that we can identify what's out of hours and what's in hours. Now, obviously, every time we're engaging within Teams, within meetings, Outlook, we can see all of that information. We can measure that information. So we can see when we're doing particular things. We can then start to look at actually how long is that? What type of hours are we actually spending checking in Outlook to see whether we've got email or checking Teams for new messages? We can then start to look at the fragmented hours. And this really comes back to, if I have a job to do and I need to actually concentrate on doing something, writing a document, writing code, reviewing a document, I need to have time to concentrate on that. If I don't have time, if I have lots of meetings, then maybe I'm not actually getting the time to actually get my head into that space to really concentrate on it. And that can be really detrimental to my productivity. It can reduce the quality of what I'm doing, but it can also increase the time it takes for me to actually complete something. So really thinking about how we spend the time, the hours that we've got, is a really important, it's an important metric for a lot of organizations. Now, when we start to then look at, okay, well, we've got this information, we can see how much time we're spending, and then we can start to break it down, and we can start to say, well, actually, if I'm spending that much time in meetings, that much time doing email, do I have time outside of all of that to actually do things. Maybe my collaboration is actually not as productive as I think it should be. And it's taken away from the time that I really should be spending actually doing work, doing things. And, this is where we need to really start to then think about different teams. Different teams are going to have different behaviors. A team of developers and a sales team, they're going to have very, very different behaviors. You would expect a different profile of meetings. And this is where we can start to say, okay, if we know what both teams are doing, we can compare. Team A is doing really well. They're hitting their sales targets. Team B isn't. Team B is spending a lot more time in meetings, but not engaging with customers. So we can start to actually derive behavioral changes that we want to influence based on this type of information. Now that information's great. Office 365, that's a great source of information. But actually one of the key things that we then need to layer on top of this is organizational data. The organizational data, we really use that to define the teams that we're looking at. And then we can use the CRM data as well to actually say, well, how are we engaging? How are we delivering? What is the measurement of the processes that we've got in CRM? And when we do all of that, that comes through to workplace analytics. So that organizational data is crucial here because we need to be able to divide our organization into teams of a certain size. So workplace analytics in this context, we have to have a minimum number of people in a team to actually be able to analyze it properly. And that minimum number is 10 people. And that's for privacy reasons. It's privacy so that we can't actually identify individuals. We can only identify teams, and we can only get this information coming through at a team level. That isn't to say that we can't have multiple layers. So we can put in directorates, departments, teams, and that's how we drill into this information and see how different teams are working and see the behavior of those different teams. So the organizational data, it's not the same as Active Directory. And that's because we may need to actually adapt it to fit these team sizes so that we have our anonymity and our privacy in place. But it's also because we might have teams that we want to actually split up so that we can compare them. And so this organizational data tends to come from HR. It tends to be driven by HR to actually define what it is. And then that basically allows us to identify individuals from Office 365, map them into our organizational data and also to our CRM data as well. We won't ever see details of those individuals. We will only ever see it aggregated up into those teams within workplace analytics. But the organizational data does take some tuning and some testing to make sure we're getting the right information come out. So what do we do with that information? Well, one of the things that we really want to do is to work out where we are. Let's, understand where we are. How are our employees doing? Are they collaborating well? Are they being supported? That's what we want to respond to. We want to respond to our baseline of actually we can see where we are now. Let's respond. Let's do the immediate things that we need to do to protect our employee well-being. Let people know that we're looking at this. We then want to start to recover. And that's really when we're enabling other ways for people to have support, other ways to actually identify different behaviors that are going to be better for them. So this is where we start to have that comparative information. We can see too many meetings taking place. We can see 2 hours that are too long. Let's actually start to encourage people to change those habits. And then we can sort of reimagine. We can say, well, actually, okay, we're planning for a hybrid environment. We're planning for people to be both in the office and to be working remotely. So therefore, what does good look like? What do we want our working habits to be? How do we want our organization to work? We want to be able to retain certain things. A common one is that innovation. Well, actually, I don't feel so empowered because I don't see people so often. It's far harder to have those conversations if I have to book a meeting than it is if I'm just wander over to their desk or see them in the when I'm grabbing a coffee. So we need to think about ways of working as a longer term change and how we actually implement that to sustain some of the things that really make our businesses thrive, how we engage with people. So these are the sorts of things that we really need to think about how we're going to actually change. So that's a lot of slides, it's a lot of talking. So let me come into some demos and actually show you some of this stuff. So I'm going to start off with from a personal perspective. So I'm in Office 365. I've already loaded up My Analytics. So My Analytics is one of the tools that's available. It comes in this little round icon. We'll see that again. But essentially, if you can't see it there, go to All Apps and you should be able to see it here, My Analytics. It does need to be enabled for your organization. So if you can't see it, your organization may not have enabled it. When we come into My Analytics, what we've seen, so it does take 4 weeks to load. And what we start to see in here is information related to us. So we've got focus, so we've got time that we've got available. We've got also get started. So if you're fresh to My Analytics, it'll say get started. It'll say, okay, I want to help you book time to focus. And this is trying to remove that fragmentation. So 2 hours a day. It's a good starting point. Depends, again, always got to keep in mind what the role is that you're actually doing. So if I say 2 hours a day and I go next, well, what's better for me, morning or afternoon? Now, this might depend on maybe regular meetings that you've got scheduled. It may depend on whether you work better in the afternoon or the morning. Do be aware that as a team, you might want to engage around this and work out where people actually fit. I have come across this scenario where in the same team, you get one person who's booking the morning for focus time, one person who's booking the afternoon. You do need to have a little bit of flexibility around focus time and make sure that, you know, those meetings where you both need to come together, you do come together rather than just sticking to the time religiously saying, actually, I can't double book this time. So do remember to be flexible. If I choose morning, I then get this option, allow notifications or mute notifications. Now, this is really, if I put this on mute notifications, Teams will go into do not disturb mode. So whenever this time starts, I will go into do not disturb and people can't message me. Always do the mute notifications. The whole point of this focus time is really to remove any distractions so your attention is focused on one particular activity. So if I do that, it will go through that and it will say, okay, I'm setting that up. And what it's doing here is it's looking at my calendar and it's saying, right, what can I book? And it's actually booked out 5 days, 5 days, yeah, for the next week. And it said, right, those are the days based on my working hours. Those are the days that I can book. And if it doesn't find them, it'll have days to review. So it will show me, you know, days that I need to actually review where I haven't managed to get focus time. So it's got that in there. And I can always come back. I can come back in here in configuration. I can set my working hours, you know, so 8 o'clock till 5 o'clock on these days, and it will use that information. I can then change that schedule. If that schedule is not working for me, I can change it here. I can also do this new thing as well, delay delivery, which basically means it will try and delay the delivery of email into other people who have their working hours set. So they will only receive emails during their working hours. Interesting idea. It only works on Outlook desktop for Windows at the moment. But yeah, an interesting one just to try and stop people getting distracted and prevent them having to be online checking their emails all the time. So just coming back quickly, we've got focus, wellbeing, collaboration, and network. Focus, it's going to book time for me. Wellbeing, it's going to try and measure the time that I've not done any work. This is a demo account. I do actually do some work. But it will also show me help. So more than 40% of our creative ideas come when we are taking breaks or allowing our minds to wander, and it will show me the research. So if I click on that, it will come through and it will show me, you know, okay, how can I get more information around this particular subject area? So it's trying to educate us as well. When it comes to the network, it'll show me who I'm working with, and it will start to work out, whether I need to schedule meetings. So scheduling one-to-ones is a great way to keep in contact with my manager. So it's giving me a tip there. More tips, again, it will come back to different tips and will always come back and give me information. So this will start to really flesh out, who I'm working with and who I'm engaging with, and maybe people that I should be engaging with that I'm not. In collaboration, it will start to work out meeting habits. It will show me meeting habits. Again, this is a demo account. This isn't really got enough meetings in it to be valuable, but it will also start to work out tips around when is your calendar getting full. Your calendar might be full the week before. It might be 30% full at the start of the week. So it will give you information around how much time in advance you need to actually start booking things. So My Analytics currently is a separate app with the circle. What that's going to be moving into though is Teams. So if I come into Teams, we have Insights here. If it's not showing for you, then go to the 3 dots, the ellipsis, and type in Viva, and it will come up as Insights. So this is where the first release is done. We're expecting another release towards the end of the summer with further enhancements. But if you click on that, that will add the app there, and then you can pin it by right-clicking, and that will pin it so you'll always have it in your left rail in Teams. Now, this has got some of the features that we saw. So one of them is, protect time. It will allow me to book focus time. It's already showing those times that it booked from My Analytics. It's showing those as blue, but I can actually get a bit more flexibility here. So I can actually put a name in here as well, which is quite nice. And when I book it, that will go in and it will take the same settings. So whether that's going into that do not disturb mode, it will take that in here as well, which is really useful, really nice to be able to have more flexibility in here. Other things that we have on the home. So we've got how are you feeling? So I can say I'm feeling great, and I can see a history of how I'm feeling as well. So again, at the moment, that's only personal to you. There's no plans to share that, so far as I know. We can send praise to colleagues. So this is really building up that engagement, things that are good for us as individuals to feel like we're connected to a team. And you can customize these as well. Your Teams admin can actually customize these and put custom badges in here. So whether they align to your corporate values, then you can actually put these in here as well. So other things that we've got in here, take a break. And this is where at the moment we have a breathing exercise. It's very simplistic. It's actually really quite effective. Give it a go. It's quite a nice way just to take a break, 1 minute. We will be getting other things coming in here. So Headspace is going to be coming into this spot as well. So you can just take a minute of mindfulness and just to relax. And then we've got things like stay connected. Now, this is quite an interesting one because this one, it starts to pick up on things that you may have committed to, and we'll put them in here. So this is an email and it said, you asked, can you send me the plan for next week? So it's helping me to keep track of things that maybe I've said in emails. And then I can tick this off and say, yep, that's done, and that will disappear. So if you go in and look at this, you will probably find a whole load of things where people have committed to you and you've committed to people, and you can keep track of them in here and start to actually manage those so they're not playing on your mind. The one that's not showing up here that's got the tab in here is my organization, and that will be coming, and I'll show you a screenshot of what that will look like. So essentially that's the My Analytics piece coming. That's where it will come into. It's coming into the Viva Insights app. Some of the workplace analytics stuff will come in here as well, and that will be coming into the My Organization. So I'm going to swip over to a different client, different organization. So this is a workplace analytics. Now, workplace analytics is a licensed tool, so you do have to have a license, and you do have to be assigned to the analyst role to see this. And what I'm showing here is essentially the landing page, and it starts off with all of these tiles, and these tiles all have different statistics on them. So, boost employee engagement, 46%. If I click into that, I will get more information. So it'll say 62% of employees have less than 15 minutes of one-to-one time. It's taking all of that information that we get from Microsoft Graph, knowing who's involved with whom based on the organizational data. We're then starting to see, actually, there are different statistics that are actually of significance to us as an organization. So we have things in here. How do we define it? So all of these will have an explanation of what the logic is, what the calculations are that are actually generating this information. We'll have supporting evidence as well. So if I click on that, that's going to take me off to this insights.office.com. And it's going to take me to information that actually has the science behind this. Why is this important? What are the benefits? And it's, it is designed for people to actually read it and to understand it and to get a bit more of a feel of why all of this information is useful. We also then have things like see your insights. And what this will do is this will say, okay, well, I've got scheduled recurring meetings. So this is what we can actually do. Prepare discussion points. These are all tips how to actually make this better, how to essentially change this number. This 62% is a bad number. We want it to be much lower. This is our tips. How do we actually do this? I know we have down here IT East financial planning and facilities. This is part of our organizational data. So this is where we've taken that organizational data and we've layered it on top so that we can group it by this. And we can then go explore the stats, and that will take us in even further. And what we then see is we've got filters here, so we can look at the date ranges, we can look at the employees, the groups, and essentially what this is giving us is information that we can drill into in more detail. And some of these we can actually see more about the groups. So this one, we've got more groups. And we can see information based on our organizational data and how we've diced and sliced this information because of that data. And all of these drill in that way. So if I come into improve agility, again, we can say meetings, large meetings with 8+ attendees, long meetings that are more than an hour. So we can start to see information, and this is taking that data and really turning it into information. We can also, for some of these, come and explore in Power BI. So whilst this interface has lots of information that's ready out of the box to be consumed, actually we have the ability to use Power BI and to drill into this information and to build our own reports based on this data. That Power BI, you need the analyst role to get into it, but it is anonymized data based on that organizational structure that we're putting in. The other things that we have in here, so if I come back to this home, one of the things that we have here right at the top is download to PowerPoint. If you set this up, this is one of the best things to do. It will give you essentially one PowerPoint deck that has got all of this information in it. So we'll just wait for that to download quickly, but essentially all of these tiles, rather than having to click into all of these tiles, if you want to give your leadership team a view of, right, based on the last 13 months, which is what this data contains, this is the way our organization looks, then that one click of download PowerPoint will give us all of this information. Not quite sure what's going on at the top there. Let's just see. Okay, and it will give us all of these sections, and it will drive all of this information. It will have see in web page to actually go through and click, and it will have supporting evidence. So it's a great way to get a really quick insight of the top level headline news around where your organization sits with regards to the all of this data around employee well-being and productivity. Now, the other things that we can do in here, so we have queries, so we can run custom queries. So we've got some pre-selected, we can start custom ones. And when we go into these, we get a lot of different metrics that we can use. So we're saying time periods, exclusion. So if you want to leave out, particular members of the board of directors, you can leave them out. You can choose lots of different things that we want to find out about. So redundant attendees, total meeting costs, and then we can choose what information comes into it. And these queries, we can then leave them running. And when we come back to the queries, we can see the results. And actually, based on our queries, this gives us, again, additional insights. So we can start to then say, well, actually, let's have a look at the visualizations as a result of that one particular query with that one set of criteria. Lots of information that's available. I'm not going to leave that running. I'm conscious of time. The other thing that we can do is, if you remember, I said, the answers to these questions should give us an indication of what we want to change. Workplace analytics gives us the ability to actually create plans to help us to actually change the behaviours of our staff. So focus plan, collaboration plan, well-being plan, seller success. This is actually what goes into my analytics. So those terms that we were looking at, the focus, collaboration, well-being, this is where we can actually give targeted recommendations to groups of users within our organization. So if we know that team A is doing better than team B, we can actually target team A and go, right, okay, we want to actually push some suggestions to that particular team or that particular department and help them actually change. So if we think about what we have here, we've got the ability to get quick answers, to use Power BI to analyze it. We can get answers, numbers, measures, which we can then actually then use the focus plans, or sorry, the plans to actually change the behavior, which then over time we should be able to come back and compare. Actually, now our number is lower, which is better, or higher if it's better, but we can measure that change, and we can measure that change using the same metrics that we started with, which is really powerful. It's a very powerful way to actually say that we want to improve well-being and productivity. So I'm going to come back to the slides. So I said I'd show you what's coming. So this is really, again, you can see in here, we're in Viva Insights in the app within Teams, and this is where we start to see more of those metrics, those tiled cards coming in, being able to see information that is relevant to us. And you can see up there, the tab that we're in there is My Team. We have My Org as well. And this is where we're starting to see the information being disseminated down to the people who need to be able to see it based on the organizational structure. It's still retaining the anonymity. So for teams, it's saying, your team, teams like yours. So it's benchmarking things here and allowing line managers, in this case, to be able to measure how well they're managing their team. So there are some real world considerations around this. So one of them, workplace analytics, it does require licensing, and it requires a minimum number of exchange licenses. So it needs that in order to be able to retain the privacy. Once you have those, individual users are allocated a license. So you could be targeting, just a sales team, just a development team, just the finance team, just the HR team. You could be targeting those different teams or different divisions within your organization. And then those users are actually the only ones that are measured. Although collaboration is taken into account, it is those licensed users which actually the information relates to. Licensing at the moment is available through an EA. It wasn't available through CSP last time I checked. So do check with your licensing provider if you're interested in using this. And again, this is workplace analytics. This is the in-depth analytical engine. This isn't my analytics or the Viva Insights app in Teams. That still comes as part of the Office 365 licensing. So when we look at these licensed users, Microsoft have provided quite a lot of information in the Microsoft Docs around how this works. So they've been very clear around how the data is being aggregated based on whether they are an internal measured employee because they have a license, or whether they are collaborating with an internal measured employee, and that could be external collaborators or internal collaborators. So they're being very clear about what's being measured, and that's because this isn't providing a snooper's charter. This isn't providing insight into individuals. It is team level. So it is only storing 13 months of data. Only the licensed users are included. The minimum group sizes exist to ensure that anonymity and privacy. The data is not accessible to the global administrators even. You need to be assigned a specific role within Workplace Analytics to analyze the data. So there's a very strict way of actually managing it. Although if you're a BI developer and you have that role, you can actually produce Power BI and then you can actually share that. So there are ways to surface this information and to make sure that it's very targeted, because essentially all of this data, all of this information is being used to influence change and influence increases in the way that productivity is measured, the way that wellness is being measured, and to influence the change in behavior to increase those measures. So next steps, what can you do? If you found this useful, then really think about what it is that your organization would benefit from. Measuring current well-being, improving well-being, and then thinking about changing the way that you work. This isn't a short term where we just switch it on and leave it. This really does need engagement. It needs engagement with the leadership team, HR. It needs engagement to work out what changes need to be rolled out to improve the way your organization works and the well-being and productivity of your employees. So think about what it is that you would want to look at, what questions you would want to ask of that data. And then think about workplace analytics. Is it worth the license? It really is. The information that you get is really, really useful straight away, but you then want to dive into it. So that digital exhaust converts into some really useful metrics, and those metrics are available as soon as that data has been ingested. But then you really want to start to see comparative data. How can you compare team A and team B? What are the measures that you're trying to get to? What does good look like? Do you bring in those pulse surveys to see how they're actually feeling in comparison to CRM data, in comparison to organizational HR data about performance possibly? These are the things that measure good, so that you can actually then start to say these behaviors influence good. They make it better for those teams. They're more likely to be successful as teams. And then Viva Insights. We know Viva Insights is rolling out. It is available. My Analytics is also available. So if your organization hasn't switched them on, then maybe you need to speak to your administrators to see whether you can get My Analytics switched on. And that way you will get some of the insights into your own personal ways of working. But then the Viva Insights app in Teams, add that in. Maybe if you're the administrator, think about, can you put a policy in just to get that app into Teams so that everybody has access to it? And then with both of those, think about that investment in workplace analytics to give you that deeper information around how that behavior is shaping the productivity of your organization and the wellness of your staff. To support all of this, Microsoft have put together a ton of really, really useful information. So WorkLab, if you haven't seen WorkLab, have a look. It's all about well-being, productivity, the way we use the tools, not the technology itself, the way we work. So have a look at WorkLab. The insights.office.com, that really is, it's the rationale for these. It's why do we measure it, and why is it an important number that we're actually measuring? Lots of tips and tricks on how to improve things. And then Microsoft Docs has a ton of information on workplace analytics to help understand how to get it set up, how to use it, and how to make the most out of it. So with that, are there any questions? Let me just check and see in the chat. So let me see any questions. If there are any questions, just throw them into the chat. and I'm more than happy to answer them. I'll put a link into the chat to this as well, but please do provide feedback as well. If you've enjoyed the session, let me know. If there are things that you would think that it can be improved, also let me know. And also let us know how the conference is. We all need to know so that we can improve. And then finally, please do reach out if you have any questions. If you think about questions after this, then feel free to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, and I'm more than happy to chat about this. So if there are no questions, last chance for questions in the chat. If there are no questions, then I will stop the recording and we will prepare for the next session. Thank you very, very much for attending.